Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our public hearing tonight for the Fairport Public Library budget and the Fairport Central School District budget for the year 2023-2024. I'm Peter Forsgren, standing in right now as for Vice President for Erica Bellis-Pacer, who will be here shortly, but we will hand it off shortly. We're grateful to present the budget, though. It's been through a process starting last October or so, and the priorities that were set both through reaching out to the community, talking with our students and teachers, and think we have an exciting budget that represents the priorities of the community, represents the needs of the students, and able to move us forward in a very strong way. So with that, I'm going to hand it off, to the library first, to our Mr. Provenzano?
To the library. Carl Gavayev from the Fairport Public Library is going to present the budget for the library, and I know that's a community service that people take advantage of, and we're proud and happy to partner with you.
Perfect. Thank you, Superintendent.
Just to jump in real quick, if anybody wishes to comment, there's a sign-in sheet over on the table to our right-hand side as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Just want to first thank the school board and the school district for giving the library an opportunity to present the budget at this event. So I'm going to start off with the ongoing and new challenges the library has been facing over the course of the year and what we predict will continue to face over next year. As everyone knows, there are inflation, supply chain issues affecting people and businesses. These inflationary pressures and vendors with staff shortages and supply chain issues make it sometimes very difficult to run a facility. You know, we often call repair men to come in, look at our facility, and you know, sometimes they don't get back to us with quotes, or the quotes come back and it's much higher than what we expect. We were renovated. The library was renovated now going about 8 years ago. So we're starting to see some issues here and there across the facility. So those inflationary pressures and issues with trying to get vendors in has been difficult. Another challenge that I've been facing is that Governor Hochul has proposed to cut library aid in her executive governor's budget. This was something we saw year after year with Governor Cuomo. Last year, Governor Hochul did not propose a cut to library aid, which was great, and we were able to see significant gains in library aid. But you know, she, in her executive budget for this year, she proposed a cut to library aid, and then what it becomes is a struggle trying to get those cuts not only enacted or removed, but also trying to see any sort of increase or gain in library aid. Unfortunately, the New York State library aid has been under ed law formula since 2008, when it was cut after the housing bubble, and it has never recovered from that cut. Those cuts mainly impact the Monroe County Library System. That impacts us because they end up increasing our cost shares, how much the Fairport Public Library pays to the library system. And then they inevitably also need to cut or dilute the level of service that they're providing Fairport. The one silver lining here is that last year they were able to increase the library aid significantly, not to ed law formula, but we saw a significant increase, and we're hopeful that our representatives will be able to negotiate at least the 2022 level. Of course, we're seeing minimum wage increases continue. When we developed this budget, we were projecting that it would hit $15 an hour at the end of the year. And I just read a news article where part of their New York State budget negotiations, they are looking at increasing minimum wage to $15 an hour. So when we developed this budget, that was one thing we had an eye on, that halfway through our fiscal year, we would see minimum wage at 15. There's also, of course, the state mandated retirement contribution, healthcare costs, technology costs, all of those we're seeing increase, and a lot of it due to vendors with staffing shortages. So this is our proposed budget for next fiscal. I'm not going to read it line by line, but you can see the breakdown of the various categories: salaries, benefits, library materials, occupancy costs, which are telephone, utilities, custodial supplies, building maintenance, rent, insurance, and building contract. And rent is part of it, where we're located in the Fairport Village Landing Mall. That is a space that we rent from FDP Management. You can also see equipment, which runs the gamut from our computers to our copiers. And then you'll see the Monroe County Library System cost shares, professional fees, lawyer fees are included in there, background check for library employees. And lastly, you have all other, which includes office supplies, AV supplies, postage freight, programming, professional education, all of that. On that bottom line, you can see the total for next year's budget is 3.2 million, almost 3.3, less the revenue sources. That's the money coming in from fines, fees, membership fees. That would be about 128,000. We're going to appropriate from the fund balance almost $500,000. So we're looking at a proposed tax levy of $2.7 million. That is a $52,000 increase over the levy we had last year, which was about $2.6 million. And this is the historical budgeted expenditures. This is on the expenditure side. You can see we've been able for, from about 2019 to 2022 to keep it smaller increases on our expenditure side. Unfortunately, with the inflation and everything else that all of us have been dealing with personally as well, we're seeing an increase to our level of costs. So this goes to show you just what the personnel expenses will be for the next year as compared to this year. And you can see where our professional line is. That would be librarians, library director, clerical line, pages, custodial, and our aides, for a total of almost 1.7 million. With benefits at about 700,000, you're looking at about 2.4 across our personnel expenses. Of course, we're a service agency. We provide a lot of services to the community, so naturally personnel is our greatest expenditure. And this is the breakdown for benefits. You've got New York State Retirement, health insurance, FICA, and then all other benefits as well. And all other, some of the stuff that are in, you'll find in there is such as our EAP and things along those lines. So here's our non-tax revenue sources. We have we're projecting roughly about 46,000 coming in for fines, fees, printing. Pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes, we're estimating about 20,000. State aid, we're hoping there'll be an increase. We'll see. But we had projected it to be about 12,000. Interest income, we used to have that at 1,000. We're looking at how we invest our funds. So we're hoping to see a realized investment of return on investment of about 50,000. Subtotal, there's 128,000 across the revenue line, and then appropriating out of our fund balance 458,000. All right, and then this slide here is the property tax levy cap. You can see going down here, I know a lot of times people are confused. They think it's always 2%. It's not necessarily. There's a lot of calculations that are involved. But if you go down the line, you can see that the tax levy limit is 2.7 million, which is about 2.47%. Now, if you don't use your entire limit from the previous year. The state allows you to carry over a certain amount of that limit. So we've got a carryover of 41,000. Last year and the year before, we kept our tax levy flat. So we have the ability of accessing even more carryover the last couple of years. So that ultimately is an adjusted tax levy limit of $2.7 million, just a little bit over 4%. As the committee discussed and talked about these numbers, we decided just to go with a 2% increase, and that's just under 2.7 million. So the actual increase is going to be almost $53,000. What we could have increased by is 106,000. So less than half of what we would be able to normally increase. On this slideshow, you can see the fund balance, and this is just where we have the fund balance allocated. All right, on this slide, you can see the library service data. You can look at total circulation for 2022, and we had 571,000 circs. We are still, and we've been consistently for the last few years at least, the highest circulating library building in the county. And I say building because when you look at the Rochester Public Library branches altogether, they circ more than us. But when you're just looking at building to building, we see more circulation at the Fairport Public Library than even the Central Library downtown. So we have a lot of circulation. We're a very well-used library. We're not at our pre-COVID numbers, but we are still very well-used. You can also see the increase in the circulation of digital materials. Pre-COVID, we were just under 70,000. After with COVID, that leapt, and we're at about 107,000 now. It has definitely slowed down, and when you're looking at a percentage of the overall circ, in 2020, we hit our highest point where 23% of our circulation was digital materials. It dropped down to 19.5 in 2021, and in 2022, it's at 18.86. So people are coming back in more for those print materials. For those who wonder, do people still check out books? Do people still want print? We're seeing the greatest increase in the print circulation. And then as for visitors to the library, we're still not at pre-COVID levels. There could be a couple of factors that may mean we never will get there. I have seen regular patrons that were pre-COVID in the library every day, checking out a book here, a book there, coming in once a week and grabbing a pile. So I think some of those things, people have changed their habits since COVID. However, I also tell my board, when looking at those numbers, we switched the technology we use to count people as they walk through the door with a more accurate door counter. And we had a short period of time, about 6 months, where there was overlap, where I could look at what the old counter said and what the new counter says. And the old counter was consistently, month after month, about 20% more than the new counter. So that 284 is probably closer to 220 to 230.
Does it, like somebody walks in, it triggers it?
So it essentially, the old one, somebody walks through and there was an infrared line that was triggered. So I guess if like someone was swinging a bag, they could trigger the infrared a couple of times. The new method is there's a sensor in the ceiling, and from what I understand, or what I was told, is it counts the body heat as they come in. And it can tell direction as well, whether they're entering the library or exiting the library. So that 205 should be pretty close to accurate. Essentially, for 2022, when you're looking at library visits, as I mentioned, we saw about 205,000 people enter the library over the course of the year. That would be, on average, about 74 visitors per hour coming into the library. Of course, if you come to the library during one of our slow times, winter, evening, you're not gonna find 74 people in the library. But if you came in during the summer months, morning, we've got our children's programs hopping, you'll probably see twice that number in the library. So this goes back to our total circulation. Essentially, we circulate about 1,600 items a day. That's through digital, print, renewals, all that is included in that number of 1,600 per day. And that's 365 days a year. I didn't look at what days we were open, because when you check out any of our digital materials, you can do that at any day, any time of night, that you'll have access to our Libby or Hoopla or any of our other digital formats. And here we have our programming data. You can see early literacy program, birth to age 5. We see about 17,000 individuals attending those programs. Programs outside of the literacy ones, we see about 6,000 attendees. Teens, they're busy. They're doing baseball and football and soccer and cheerleading. So that's a bit on the lighter side. And then they tend to come back in once they hit adult, especially as the kids are busier. They tend to have more free time to come to some library programs. Overall, we saw 33,000 attendees at 1,518 programs in 2022. That would equal about 22 attendees at all of our library programs. I just talked briefly about the Monroe County Library System and their cost shares. As the library aid is cut or not increased, we sometimes see cost shares go up or services decrease. It's what we pay to the Monroe County Library System to provide these consolidated cost-sharing services. It provides a lot of economy of scale, so we're not paying for that stuff on our own. Part of that is automation, our online catalog, circulation. That is all software that the system pays for. Another thing is delivery of library materials. If you check something out at Pittsford, you can return it at Fairport. If you check something out from Hamlin, you can return it at Fairport, and it is returned to their library through the Monroe County Library System. If you see something at Greece that you want that the library does not have, we could place a hold on it free of charge, and that item is sent to Fairport. It takes 3 to 5 business days, but eventually it will arrive, and you don't have to make the drive out. They also provide us fiber optic internet access. A couple of years ago, they did a RFP for fiber optics directly to not just the building, but to our network rack in the building. And that was, a company was approved, and now every single Monroe County library has fiber optics into the building right to our server rack. They do provide some online databases. We also pay for some additional ones for the Fairport residents, and they digitize electronic materials as well for the public libraries. 2022 library use continues to rebound. We're seeing more programs, more attendees, more in-person on-site programs. We're also increasing the number of in-person off-site programs with our community partners, especially our children's department. They do a great job. They do story times with various preschools throughout the school district area. They also go out to the Pines for story time, and they do a lot of what we call outreach, and that is, increasing the amount of outreach we do. They're actually going to be this Saturday over at Fellows Road, part of the Mighty Machines program that the town is doing. They will be reading books, and you can also see the Monroe County Library truck that delivers all of these books around the county. And then also other cool stuff like, bulldozers and things like that. And then we're seeing more borrows. We saw about a 9% increase in our circulation in 2022. So what is the cost for 1 year of library service? This is based on a $200,000 home that's assessed by the town at $200,000. This is, of course, an estimate based upon the 2022-2023 tax roll. If properties are added, that amount may go down. And the town is not doing a reassessment for this year, a home assessment. So unless there's houses added, it should be roughly about that amount. We're looking at about $153.45 for a $200,000 home. It's a $3 increase over last year. We've been keeping it relatively flat over the last couple of years. As I mentioned, we did not increase the tax levy. So you can see from 2021 to 2022, it went down from 152 to 151, and then from 151 to 150. And now just tamping back up with about $3 more a year. And this is my last slide. I've had questions before from members of the public, sometimes the school board, about the relationship between the library and the school district. We are completely separate entity from the school district. The school district public library is one type of library that is available in New York State. It allows the library to place its budget on the school district's vote. It allows the library to have its board of trustees elected by the community rather than handpicked by a politician somewhere. And it allows us to be a separate entity and do what's most important, and that is provide services to the community. The library school district was actually voted upon in 1839. The voters of Fairport School District Number 1 approved $10 for the purchasing of a library. Proved not to be enough, and it was basically housed in one of the schools, in one of the libraries, and it had very limited access until 1895, when the library decided to fully spin off on its own. They were chartered by the New York State Department of Education. It's probably one of the oldest, I think it was one of the first in the county to be chartered. And it's probably one of the earliest in the state as well. And the reason why I say that is, everybody knows about the New York Public Library with the two lions out front, Patience and Fortitude. They share a birthday with the Fairport Public Library. They were chartered in 1895 as well. And it goes to show you the forward thinking of our community and the founders of this community, that they knew they wanted a public library here. We are the only school district public library in Monroe County. However, there are 163 of us across New York State. A good portion in Long Island, you can see 33 in Nassau, 31 in Suffolk. Our neighbors, the Owl Library System has 13, and Niagara to the west has 8. So that is it for me.
So I'm just welcoming everyone. Thanks for being here, our large crowd. I'm not going to talk long, but I did want to let people know that if you do want to ask questions, at the table over there, there is a sign up. So feel free to sign up if you want to ask questions. But I am going to go ahead and hand this over to Mr. Provenzano and Mr. Stevens to talk about the budget. I know we have spent a lot of time looking at it over the past few months, and although I think I could talk to it, not as well as you guys. So I'm going to pass it on over.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information at our public hearing. Carl, that's always fascinating, that bit of history. Really, you make the library come to life. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and proud to be a partner with you. We're here presenting the 2023-24 budget. And it's appropriate that if you go to the high school in the auditorium, you'll see a concert that's just about to get started. It's a jazz ensemble that's just about to get going. It's raining outside, but they're playing on our fields, right? It's exciting to see the lacrosse teams out there. Baseball, I just came from outside. I was in another district though. It's cold, but they're still playing baseball, and it's great to see the action. And we're here. It's all related to how do you support a high quality programming and make sure that you have a budget that's focused and that tells a story. And we're here to talk about and tell our story in three basic parts today. The first part is going to be about our programming and the narrative that speaks to who we are as a school district and the community's expectations around programming and all the opportunities that we give our students. We're also looking at the revenue side, and that's a very important piece that Mr. Stevens will be walking us through in a little bit. And the third part is to have clarity on what exactly is in the 2023-24 budget. I really appreciate all the hands that went into preparing this budget. Mr. Stevens, your team, led by you, done a great job working with your counterparts, other administrators, to help bring this budget to fruition. We really appreciate the board's focus, their ability to get the budget goals out there sooner than later. It's a process that starts right after the budget vote. And it works through the summer, and by early fall, we have budget goals. And our budget goals have been pretty consistent. I think that speaks to the board's leadership. That leadership really provides levels of expectations and consistency so people know what to expect. This budget also reflects the community's expectations. We're really proud of the programming that we have. We see it in so many different ways played out. Another piece is fiscal responsibility and sustainability. The board has expectations that we always maintain a strong financial position, that we preserve the district's bond rating, and also managing our reserves as a way to offset future general fund costs. Part of what we do here is constantly look at our enrollment. We've worked with agencies on enrollment, statistical forecasting. We've measured multiple different times to make sure that we get enrollments correct, because that helps us with our future planning. We've done internal projections as well, and the good news is that we have a good handle on what's happening with enrollment, and you'll see class sizes, you'll hear stories of graduating class sizes of 700, right? We're not there. For the past, 12 to 15 years, there's been steady enrollment, declining enrollment. You'll see that K in 2023-24, there are about 353 students they're projecting. That number will increase as we move along, and you'll see in all of our projections that through time, students will be coming to Fairport schools. But we are expecting that 353 to round out to around 420 to 450 by the time these students graduate and they get into 12th grade. So we have a good handle on what these projections look like, and that helps us with our planning. Class sizes is a community expectation. We work closely with community members, staff, and this number cannot be underplayed, because the expectation in Fairport schools is that we have class sizes that help students and staff interact and connect with each other. And you'll see, again, these have been consistent. There hasn't been changes up to numbers here in K, 17, first grade 19, second grade 22, and so on as we move through to sixth grade to 25. This decline in enrollment impacts sections or changes in sections. You'll see that at our schools, at Dudley, Northside, and at Joanna Perrin, that there is loss of a section because of the decline in enrollment. That helps, again, as we manage budgets and make sure that we're able to provide a responsive and responsible budget to our community, that we're staying within these limits, and these are consistent expectations that we've been able to uphold. Secondary, 7 through 12, you'll see between 23 and 26. Now, anytime you do a master schedule, there's always anomalies. And sometimes you'll see class sizes of 21, and sometimes you'll see class sizes of 27. That's because of when you master schedule, there's many nuances to consider. There's students taking certain classes that puts them in certain areas in their schedule. So on average, these class sizes equal 23 to 26 for 7th and 8th grade, and in grades 9 through 12, 24 to 27. There are times, there are anomalies where class sizes need to be lowered. Special area classes like art, technology, they might need special class sizes because there could be a capstone project, there could be a safety concern, so we want to make sure that numbers are lower so we can maintain a safe and healthy environment. Another opportunity to meet students where they are with special programming like artists in residence is one of our favorites here, where students get to learn from professionals. Part of our work is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community. We take pride in the fact that we communicate, try to do it in different ways. We send out surveys, thought exchanges to make sure that we have a good pulse on what the community's expectations are. The board reads this information and they synthesize it as we create the budget and we make our recommendations, and that's what you're seeing here today. There were themes when we communicated or when we reached out to the community. What do our students need? And coming out of a pandemic, we're still working through many of those nuances of getting the rhythm and pace and making sure we're meeting the needs of our students. The social emotional support at each building. We talked about making sure that we take academic, social emotional, and community resources and having a process to connect all those very important ideas together. Special education instruction, particularly in the K-5 area, and tutoring and alternate ed education, having support in those areas as we built the budget. And you'll see that through the retirements, we'll be losing 0.4 full-time equivalents. So we won't be hiring forced FTE or positions back. There weren't any layoffs, we're just not hiring them back. But then you'll see plus 2.0 FTE school counselor, 2.2 FTE psychologist for K-8 and district-wide, and a 2.0 FTE behavior specialist. Now, the behavior specialist and school counselors will be going to the elementary schools, and I think that's important to recognize. Right now, they're sharing these positions, and it's really hard to share a counselor. It's really hard to share a behavior specialist, or for that matter, even a psychologist. We want to make sure our buildings are whole, so we can meet the social emotional needs that we're experiencing, that we can make sure that, if there's, future planning, middle school planning, if there's behavior plans that need to be implemented, there's a wide range of special ed needs and counseling that need to be administered. So these positions will help make us whole. The special ed teacher, the teacher and the teacher on special assignment will be looking to take a class back at Johanna Perrin. That's good news, is that we're trying to bring students from out of district placement back to Fairport. And there's a teacher on special assignment that we're looking to have work with our elementary teachers to model best teaching practices, to provide support in those classrooms, as we're proud to serve our students, and we want to make sure that our staff are prepared and organized, and that's what that teacher on special assignment is going to do to support those classrooms. There's also looking at some administrative support with a 1.0 senior teacher aide. That senior teacher aide would be looked to house here at Fairport High School to support with alternative educational programming, and a 1.0 full-time equivalent for a multi-tier systems of support administrator. An MTSS coordinator is someone who takes the academic, social emotional, and community resources that are at our disposal and systematizes it to make sure that all of our buildings are working under a consistent framework when it comes to the academic and social, emotional, and the community resources that are at our disposal. There needs to be oversight and coordination amongst our buildings, and that's what that administrator will be doing. Again, proud of the fact that we're able to get this information from our community and create a budget serving these needs. Part of Fairport, we're a real live organization, and we're really proud to support our staff, making sure that we have employee benefits. And part of all the program, administrative, and capital lines, there's an employee benefit line, and it's relative to the New York State contributions that we are required to make. The state sets the limit. We do not, set the limit. The state sets the limit, and they're setting it next year for the ERS. That's about 500 of our employees, and those are employees like our cafeteria staff, transportation, B&G, our non-collective workers, and our sentries. Those are non-certificated employees. That contribution rate is increasing about 1.5% from 11.6 to 13.1%. TRS, Teachers Retirement System, that's our certificated employees. That's our TAs, our administrators, and our teachers. There's probably about the same number, about 500 of those professionals as well. That line, TRS, again, set by the state, is decreasing from 10.29 to 9.76, so about 0.5%. And again, you'll be seeing that in all the line items as we move forward. Health and dental insurance, workers' compensation, that's all part of our employee benefits. Again, the cost of having an organization and serving our staff to make sure that we provide these benefits to them. Program budget. The best way to speak about our programming, we have a great video that we want to share that I think highlights what we're trying to accomplish.
The Fairport Central School District puts students first every single day, supporting our future-ready Raiders and our staff who strive to meet each student's academic and social-emotional needs. Your investment in the district allows us to expand our extraordinary programming and uplift the people who make it all possible. The 2022-23 school year started our youngest students off with new programming that is uniquely Fairport. Our Spark Lab opened the door to new possibilities for our elementary students and their active imaginations with science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
Optimus says, give yourself moose antlers.
It's one of my favorite parts of all of school.
You could trace those skills throughout a student's journey in Fairport all the way to our acclaimed NASA Hunch class, where students put their heads together to solve real-world problems and build prototypes for the National Space Program. The Fairport education prepares students to be future-ready in the classroom and in the world outside our walls. Our CARE principles, otherwise known as compassion, awareness, respect, and embracing differences, come to life during Brotherhood Sisterhood Week. This year, our students sparked their care in their buildings and during the beloved Outreach Day visits.
Twinkle, twinkle, all the night. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are.
Our CARE values are the lens through which Fairport staff and students interact with the world and share their light with others. Generosity is everywhere you look, from raising funds for families in need in our community to walking the walk for Golisano's Children's Hospital. Our student athletes adopting a cause that is close to their heart, or students letting their teachers know they are second to none.
Congratulations, Mrs. Brown.
And everywhere you look, you'll see staff members dedicating their time and energy to creating welcoming and affirming environments for our students and families. To our Fairport and Parrington community, your investment in our schools makes our mission a reality and creates real value for our students and school community. Thank you for your support this and every year as we continue to develop generations of future-ready Raiders.
again, to highlight, thank you once again, Lindsay Reidig, for your work on that and many other bright spots that speak to our program.
This is Jules, VP of Academy.
That's cool. You know, when you look at what we offer, the elementary master schedule has been a highlight for this past year. The Spark Labs provide enrichment to all of our students. It gets them actively engaged in creative curriculum, standards-based curriculum. Our elementary class sizes, how we promote health in all of our buildings beyond mandates, because our community expects that. We're teaching healthy life choices and wellness skills throughout. Performing arts, take a look at what occurs right now in our auditorium, but also think back to The Little Mermaid, which just occurred last month. Fabulous show of community support for our programming. The art exhibit that is at the Parrington Square Mall, that is a wonderful tribute to our K-12 art programming. Our mental health staff, we are proud of the fact of this investment because it speaks to the board's priorities of making sure that the social emotional needs of our students are being addressed to the best possible extent, and being intentional with our programming in that realm. Co-curricular activities, so many opportunities to engage students, to help them find the best version of themselves as they journey through our schools. We're really serious about curriculum, making sure that the curriculum is aligned, meaningful and relevant to our students' lives. All that takes an investment, and it's part of our program budget. And you'll see our program budget outlined here. You'll see some bumps in certain areas like special programs. It's an 8.44% increase in our special programs. Now, special programs, that's where you'll see some special ed positions. You'll see that special ed increase that we talked about at 2.2 FTE that I was mentioning earlier. You'll see private placements. We have students who go through, and we're honored to provide these opportunities and services to our families based upon their individual learning needs, but the private placements are in that. And we have students who attend EMCC, which is our partnership with BOCES. Students take a range of different courses at BOCES. Again, our commitment to try to have something for everybody in a program. Our ENL students, our ENL program has grown significantly, and we're proud of that. We're proud of our educators who serve these wonderful students and their families as they make their way through our schools. You'll see in that same line, family and consumer science, technology, and business. Again, things that are not necessary mandates, but they're expectations and priorities for our Board of Education, that reflects our community's priorities. You'll see an increase of 45% in summer school. That is grant reallocation to the general fund. Mr. Stevens and his team is always trying to make sure that we're complying with the different parameters with grants and how we fund programs like summer school. So that's why you'll see dollars were shifted from grants to the general fund, along with some salaries that were associated with that. Student services, we talked about the mental health support, the behavior specialists, including the counselors as well. This is our clubs and our activities. Our athletic program is also in as part of that 8.12%. Transportation costs, we really want to be competitive. If you want to be a driver, we invite you to apply, and so we can get you signed up. But the board had made it a priority to make sure that our transportation staff is well compensated at a competitive rate. We're trying to recruit, retain these wonderful workers who are the first individuals who interact with our students throughout the day. So it's a priority to make sure that we're addressing their needs. And there's also other pieces in there from the maintenance. Well, actually, I'll be talking about that in a little bit. That's I'm a little ahead of myself, but so did I mess that? It's a 6.5% increase, not a 9.9, so I apologize. So the 9.65 is the pupil services increase, and the transportation is a 6.56% increase. The transfer to special aid fund, again, that's summer school reallocations, and that's where you'll see our UPK. We're really proud of the fact that we're introducing UPK. Mr. Stevens, how many extra classes are we doing? Is it 3 extra classes? Is it 2? 2 extra classes. They'll be housed in our buildings, one at Brooks Hill and one at Northside for next year. It takes resources to do that, and we're really proud and looking forward to continuing to build upon our UPK program moving forward. And you'll see a 4.62% increase in that line item. The administrative budget, that's pretty much what it is. It's costs associated with the administration of the district and each of our school buildings. It's about 11% of our total budget. You'll see community relations, the superintendent's office, the Board of Education, many of our administrative tools and databases and resources that we use, software, to make sure that we're compliant with state regulations, but also, communicating with families through Parent Square, sharing information through School Tool, and making sure that those software licenses are being utilized with our partners with BOCES too. The Board of Education is a volunteer, purely volunteer, I would say, calling. There is amazing opportunities, and you make important contributions to the future of our Fairport students. But you'll see in the Board of Education line item, there's a 10% increase. Well, that's costs associated with meetings. That's costs associated with votes. We pay those individuals who come and work the budget vote, right? And that's impacted by minimum wage. So you're seeing wage adjustments there. There's professional learning. The board, there's many regulations and many opportunities to learn, legal components and compliance that they want to make sure that they're abreast on. So that's why you'll see an increase in that line item. Also, other central services is a 7.3% increase. That's our work with BOCES. BOCES is a great partner, but network support, network technicians and software licenses is sort of into that area. And that's pretty much the cost of doing business. I mean, you have to be nimble and making sure that you're using the best and most effective software tools and databases so we can impart quality programming. You'll see a minus 42%. We've been paying approximately $1 million a year for the past 3 years to support a BOCES renovation. We're no longer obligated to pay that. We use BOCES, and it's based. The payment was based upon our usage in a formula that was given to us. And again, many of our students take advantage of BOCES and BOCES programming, from special ed to students who are engaged in BOCES programming certifications. Yep. Instructional administrative support, again, that's where you'll see our principals, our directors, our deputy superintendent, and the addition of the MTSS director, and you'll see a 5.9% increase there. Overall, you'll see when you add up all of those, a negative 3.7% increase for the administrative budget. Capital budget, this is one of the most impressive pieces. Again, it's 14% of our budget, but it's 12 buildings, it's 300 acres, it's 1.2 million square feet. If you take a look at our transportation, that's 900,000 bus stops a year, 1.1 million miles annually. These our buses are navigating throughout the area. There's parking lots, there's maintenance, there's utilities, upkeep to keep the lights on, and there's a cost to that. And part of that is seen in an increase of 5.15% in our operations and maintenance line. But you also see a line that the board has really invested in over the past several years, and that's security. We're proud of the security and health and safety work that we're doing. We think that we're leaders in this area. And we're proud of the work that Sam Farina and his team is continuing to contribute to our schools. And you'll see bus purchases. That line item went up 23%. The cost of buses have increased. Maintenance on buses have increased. We are looking to replace 9 buses. They're on a 10-year replacement. It's just like at your house with your own car, your own vehicle. You want to make sure that your vehicles are operating efficiently and safely, especially when we're transporting our most precious commodity, and that's our students. You'll see that service 2019 capital improvement project that is coming due, and we'll be looking to begin making payments, and that's why you see a 562% line item increase there. But that's something that we've planned for, and that's part of the 2019 capital improvement project, which voters approved. The interfund transfer, that service and capital, and that's current debt. That's debt that we've had from previous capital improvement projects, and all that equates to an 18.3% increase. Total expenditures, when you put program, administrative, and capital together, is a 5.31% increase. And Mr. Stevens now is going to talk a little bit about revenue and how we're going to pay for these commitments.
Great, thank you and good evening. Again, just before jumping into the revenue side, I know, as we look at the total expense, we talk our enrollment, from a per pupil perspective, the district, approximately looking at budget, it's about $28,400 per pupil when looking at total budget. Again, when that kind of gets aligned throughout, it's different areas such as the program, administrative, and capital. So that's looking at it from an overall perspective. We see slight growth, we see inflation, we see many different factors impacting our expense side of the budget over the years. Next, and if you take a peek at the debt on the previous slide, 2.4 million is solely a portion of increase related to debt. So, kind of extracting some of those numbers and the impacts and comparisons across districts, some variables could fluctuate as you look across different school districts, especially related to, debt service, capital work, and so on. As we jump into the next portion in terms of how do we pay for the expenses and all the programs and all the fantastic things we do here in Fairport, here's just a quick peek in a pie chart format that talks about the different forms of revenue that we have. The two largest pieces of revenue will be property tax and state aid. So state aid is that aid provided by the state. It's in the form of operating aid through foundation aid, and then we have expense-based aids that flow into that as well. Or categorical aids, also known as. And then sales tax, that's sales tax shared by Monroe County that Fairport receives. Fortunate to be able to have that sharing in place, that we receive that revenue. It's very valuable to us to be able to continue to support all the programs and services we offer. Assigned fund balance and general fund reserves. We'll talk about that a little bit later throughout the presentation, but essentially those are monies that we have in savings or remaining funds or surplus at the end of the current fiscal year that we're assigning to the following fiscal year to continue to manage the tax increase and try to maintain those levels and stay within the property tax cap. And then our debt service fund, those are monies available in a fund that have to be used to pay for the local share of debt. So we have plans, long-range planning in terms of how to manage the oncoming debt service or any spikes that we have within the debt service payments. Again, we have the large debt coming on, new debt in 2023-24, that we have some premium from a short-term borrowing, a bond anticipation note that we received last year that is meant to be applied against the interest payment of the debt. That's a little over $400,000. And then additional debt service fund money that we're able to apply towards the local share of the debt, which is essentially the principal and interest payment minus the state building aid we receive. So here's a look at this New York State aid to education. So up here you see information related to the governor's executive budget proposal. Now, the state's been busy over the past few days. We've seen a conceptual agreement was announced a few days ago, and now they're continuing to sign bills, as we speak and release information. So the budget in preparing for next year that we had to work off of was the governor's proposal. At quick analysis of what we've seen start to come out of the state, we feel comfortable with what we have projected for next year overall. So I'll just kind of start to highlight foundation aid. That's our largest operating aid. So here you see we'll be seeing a large increase. This is the third year of the phase-in of fully funding the foundation aid formula per law at the state level. So we see a large increase for 2023-24, over $4 million. It's greater than 10%, so you'll see, and we get to some future slides, information related to foundation aid spending plan. Mr. Provenzano talked earlier about some methods and approaches that we've done to plan for budget that we continue to do regarding thought exchange and surveys, as well as our community and staff budget meetings that help us prepare for allocation of state aid and tax funds to support the budget long term. And then expense-based aids, that's another piece. Again, those are aids related to transportation, BOCES, our building aid, hardware, software, library materials, textbook. Those are based on formulas at the state level where aid is driven based off of expenses in the current year. It's aided in the following school year. So those formulas projected to stay the same and continue to drive aid in the same fashion as it has been. So now jumping into the state aid revenue, as mentioned, foundation aid, we're seeing a large increase, a little over 15% increase in foundation aid, $4 million. And then the other aids are remaining fairly stable. Now, behind the scenes with the categorical aid of BOCES and building, we have a reduction in BOCES aid related to the BOCES capital project that we saw on the expense side dropping off. And then we have an increase in building aid, both about $1 million, so they offset each other on the net side of revenue, but they are different categories of aid. So the $1 million of building aid that's projected to increase next year will help support the debt payment in 2023-24. So overall, about a 9% increase in our state aid. This is just a chart showing the growth. So back in 2021-22 was the first year of the 3-year phase-in of foundation aid. And then we saw that increase in 22-23 and 23-24. This is the last year of phasing in the foundation aid according to the formula. So projected in future years to be related to inflationary factors and so on, but not anticipate to see such large increases that we've seen historically. So again, that's part of our long-range planning with our reserves and so on to help us in future years. This is language, I'm not going to read through all of this, but this is essentially language at the state level for the foundation aid spending plan. Like Mr. Provenzano mentioned, and I said before, through our thought exchange, through our community budget meetings, our staff budget meetings, we've gathered information, and then that helps us plan for future budgets in 2023-24. So categories you can see on the screen in terms of where the monies must be spent and allocated. You can kind of run through those. Achievement gaps, class sizes, providing social emotional supports, as well as supports for English language learners, students with disabilities, and so on. And here's just a quick summary for Fairport in terms of how the foundation aid increase will be allocated. So primarily related to that first category, eliminating achievement gap, increasing graduation rates, reducing class sizes, providing supports for students not meeting or at risk of not meeting state learning standards in core academic areas. About $3 million related to FTEs. A big portion of that is helping us maintain our smaller class sizes at the K through 6 level. So that's a key piece. It's not just reducing class size, it's also maintaining and preventing us from having to increase class size. So a big piece of that is related to the K6 and maintaining those class sizes. And then other pieces, equipment, hardware, software, we see the increases in software licensing, providing hardware and equipment to help support these pieces. And then social emotional health, as Mr. Provenzano mentioned earlier, you see some of the increases within the budget related to, in the next two categories, our special ed, our behavioral specialists, psychologists. Those are tied into social emotional health, guidance counselors, and then the next piece of our English language learners, students with disabilities, our special education program, et cetera. And then even tied into part of this is transportation and drivers as it relates to some of the homeless services that we provide as a school district. So all those tied together for about $4.8 million, which is just over the foundation aid increase of $4.6 million. So the next largest piece of our revenue, really the largest piece, is the property tax levy. Up on the screen talks about the 2% tax cap. Again, I believe Mr. Gouveia mentioned this in his presentation. It's not really 2%. 2% is one piece of the formula related to the growth in CPI year over year. There are other pieces within the formula that can make that either higher or lower than 2%. And here's a look at what it looks like for Fairport. So the second line, you see tax base growth factor. That's a growth of the assessments within the town of Perryton, typically on a lag, but then you see that factors into the formula. So when that's greater than 1%, which you see here, it's 0.48%, that will result in some partial growth to the formula. And then there's some payments in lieu of taxes that added for prior year, subtracted for current year, that flow through. And then the 2% number really that we hear at the state level is that middle way down the screen where it says allowable levy growth factor is the lesser of 2% or CPI. Well, CPI is 8% for the prior year. Our growth in the tax levy limit is only 2%. So we are limited and that is capped, and we are following the law overall. Then the other big piece to the formula is related to the capital levy. So as it relates to the local share of debt on capital projects and the local share of bus purchases. That's the other piece of capital that is an exclusion. You see that at $1.7 million, which brings our tax levy limit up to $85.3 million, or a 2.98% growth in the levy. As you look at that formula overall, even if there were stable debt service and capital levy, we'd expect growth over 2% because you have a growth factor of greater than 1% on the second line, and then you have a 2% growth in CPI, where that's capped at. So you can see on the right-hand side, the key exclusions to the formula. I talked about them. The fourth bullet down, there is no exclusion for TRS and ERS this year because as Mr. Provenzano mentioned earlier, it's about a 1.5% growth in the employer retirement system, and it was a reduction in the contribution rate for the teacher retirement system. So there's no exclusion for that particular category. So here's a look at the school budget, tax levy, and tax rate percentage changes over the years. In 2023-24, again, mostly related to our debt service, the increased supports we're able to provide with foundation aid increases. You see our budget growth at 5.31%. Also takes into account all those inflationary factors that we have to manage and work within, wage compression and so on, and minimum wage. Our tax levy growth is, again, 2.98%. So that's different than the growth in the school budget. School budget is what are the funds needed to manage and really fund all the programs and services we have as a district. The tax levy is just one of those pieces that can help support and pay for those items. So again, a 2.98% growth in the levy, which then translates to a growth in the tax rate projected at 2.98%. And you can see a chart down below. Important to note, we'll talk about it on the next slide here, but you can see in blue the rate percent change historically has been below the levy percent change. And that's because when there is a growth in the tax base for the town of Perryton related to Fairport schools, then the tax rate will not grow as much as projected. It'll actually be a lower percentage change than the tax levy. Here's just a look at the rates. About a 70-cent change from 22-23 to 23-24. That equates to about a $140 increase for a $200,000 home for the services for the school district. Again, 2.98% increase there. If there's a growth in the tax assessment base, that will lower the projected tax rate. Again, we've seen that over the years where the projected tax rate has come in less than what was originally estimated during the budget process. Assessments, not finalized till summer. Tax rate is set at the end of the summer as well in August. So tying all of the revenues together from the tax levy to the state aid, Again, you saw this earlier on a chart in the pie graph, but the two big pieces of growth being our tax levy and our state aid, dollar-wise, is an increase in sales tax projections. We've seen those figures come in greater than historical budgets, so there is some growth in revenues there. A reduction in our assigned fund balance, again, continuing to try not to reduce reliance on surplus annually. That's why you see that reduction there in the assigned fund balance. And then our transfer to debt service, that large increase related to the premiums on the bond anticipation notes I mentioned earlier, and then support from the fund as a whole to help manage the long-term debt and new debt that we have coming on. So total revenue budget with the fund balance of reserves equaling the same as the expense side of the $151.7 million. Here's just a look and breakdown of the different reserves and fund balance used to allocate within the budget. Again, you can see remaining mostly stable except for the debt service fund. Again, longer range plan as we manage that new debt coming on over the years. So about $7.2 million. That increase from prior year, again, related to the debt service fund. And then this is just looking at it backwards. We start with our total budget. We must have a balanced budget for school districts. So the revenues must equal the expenses. So we start with a total expense budget of $151.7 million. Our actual revenues of $144.5 million. Those are those pieces exclusive of the transfer from debt service and the fund balance reserves. We had those two pieces in for the balanced budget of $151.7 million. Just thought I'd kind of add a little additional key point here just to highlight as we get to the end of the presentation. Again, total proposed budget, $151.7 million. That growth is 5.31%. The tax levy growth is 2.98%, or $85.3 million is the total tax levy for 2023-24. That is compliant with the tax cap, as you saw earlier in the formula, and which means a simple majority approval vote on the budget greater than 50%. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Provenzano to close out the last couple of slides.
Thank you very much for clarity. What's on the ballot? There are 4 propositions. Proposed 2023-24 budget for the Fairport Central School District. There are 3 Board of Education seats open, running unopposed, including incumbent Erica Bellis Pacer, sitting to my right, also our board president, Lisa Christensen, and Nicole Thibault. For the Fairport Public Library, proposed 2023-24 budget as proposed tonight, or shared tonight, and the Public Library Trustee seat. This also, tonight, what's not on here is tomorrow, Wednesday, there will be an opportunity to meet the candidates. That's on May 3rd in Fairport High School in room 512. There's going to be an opportunity. It will be broadcast through our YouTube live, and it did make it on here. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Appreciate it. Yes, we did put that on there, and looking forward to meet the candidates. And I know our leadership students will be asking questions. Our PTA is sponsoring it, and they've spent a lot of time getting questions from community, and that will be a good night to get to know future leaders for our school district. And of course, on May 16th, please make sure your voice is heard. The budget vote and board elections, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at Johanna Perrin Middle School in the gymnasium. At this point in time, if there's any questions, please feel free to come up and sign your name and share your questions and your thoughts. If not, we will be hanging here to have a conversation if that's more comfortable. Once again, thank you. Thank you for all those who helped prepare this and brought us to this moment. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody out and about on May 16th. Thank you.